welcome back to our grammar series. Today we take a look at past modal verbs. Now in the previous lesson we looked at modal forms and their various language functions, such as offering to do something, asking for permission, making a promise or a request. In today's unit we take a look at the past verb forms of these modal verbs. We'll take a look at when to use them and some examples of how we can use them in sentences. Let's begin. Now, past modal verb forms can be used for various functions, just like their present counterparts. We use the past modal verb forms to show obligation, need, or ability. Let's start with the first one, to show an obligation. With this, we can use the verb form had to plus infinitive. For example, my grandmother was ill yesterday. I was obliged to visit her. So we can say, I had to visit my grandmother yesterday because she was ill. And in this obligation, the form is had to plus the infinitive form of the verb. Let's take a look at some other examples. Today, all parents must meet with the teacher. That is the present form using must. Now, if we were to say this, talking about the past, we would say, yesterday, all parents had to meet with the teacher. So we use the form had to plus the infinitive form of the verb meet. Note that the modal must does not have a proper past form. Another example, I must speak politely with her this afternoon. She's my cousin. Again, if we have to speak of this in the past, we will use had to plus infinitive. Our sentence would be, I had to speak politely with her. She's my cousin. Another example, in the present we say, we mustn't be rude to our guests. And in the past form, we will say, we had to be polite to our guests. Or we could say, we couldn't be rude to our guests. Moving on, using the past modal verb forms to show regret. And we use the form should have plus the past participle form of the verb, or if we were speaking in the negative, we would use shouldn't have plus the past participle form of the verb. For example, you should have met with your manager to clarify the matter. I shouldn't have yelled at my brother. So should or shouldn't have plus the past participle form of the verb. Again, to show regret, there is another past modal form we can use, and that is using ought to. So the form would be ought to have plus past participle of a verb, or in the negative, ought not to have plus the past participle form of the verb. For example, all staff ought to have seen the notice. We ought not to have sold our car. So we have seen two examples of the past modal verb forms to show regret. Moving on, using the past modal form to express a missed opportunity. And the form would be could have plus the past participle form of a verb, or again in the negative, couldn't have plus the past participle form of a verb. For example, we could have taken the train instead of the bus. We could have taken. So could have plus the past participle form of the verb take. In the negative, we could say, we couldn't have seen the view from the other room. Next, we take a look at past modal verb forms to express an unnecessary action that was done in the past. And the form for this would be needed to plus the infinitive form of a verb, or in the negative, we would use needn't have plus the past participle form of a verb. For example, we needed to leave early to get there on time. And this is the reason why we left early. In the negative, we would say, we needn't have left so early for the party. And that's because we realized later that we'd had plenty of time to get there. Now take note, we can also use the form didn't need to plus the infinitive form of the main verb. For example, we didn't need to leave so early for the party. Now we've taken a look at past modal forms to express an obligation, a need, or ability. And it's your turn to practice. Fill in these sentences using a past modal form of the verb. And the answers have been given for you. That's the end of today's session.